Joining us now from Virginia, the Democrat Junior Senator Tim Kaine. Senator, great to have you with us.
Hey, John, great to be with you. Thanks.
Okay, we got a couple issues to get to. I want to get to the War Powers Act, but I've just got to get your thoughts on the non-indictment of the Eric Garner death. It's shocking, Senator, to a lot of people. If you saw that video, you're sitting there saying to yourself, what on earth did that grand jury see that I didn't see on that video? Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, no, John, I feel the same way. It's very disturbing and troubling. You know, when you see the video, you know, it makes you really worried, and it makes you think, gosh, what really bad thing was this guy doing to get tackled like that? And he was selling some cigarettes is what he was doing. And so it's very disturbing, and it's obviously part of a trend that now is a disturbing one, and it's really creating some huge challenges in our communities, and we've got to address them.
You have to. Militarization of police, all this equipment they have from the National Defense Act, and when the Patriot Act comes up again, you know how I stand on that. I believe that was the genesis of all the stuff going on. I predicted it. I hope when it comes up, you will vote to sunset it. Well, we'll see how that plays out. Now, let's get to Iraq and Syria. Senator, you've been a lonely man in the government, in the Senate, calling for Congress to stay convened, for the president to come to Congress and ask for the authorization for this war. We're dropping bombs, no authorization, no War Powers Act. The president just committed, President Obama, another 1,500 so-called advisors. We're in a war, and Congress is cut out of the process. Why?
John, I am mystified by this, and I've been critical of the White House and of my colleagues. We are in a war. 1,500 ground advisors there, an air campaign that has now been over 1,100 airstrikes. The president has authorized another 1,500 advisors, sent paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne over earlier this week. We've had American servicemen die in this operation. 3 deaths in a supporting Operation Inherent Resolve so far. The cost is over $1 billion, but there's a strange conspiracy of silence about it because the White House has not sent a draft authorization to Congress, and Congress is refusing to even have committee votes, much less floor debates and floor votes to authorize the war. So I have been kind of lonely, banging the drum since I introduced my resolution against ISIL in September, but I am now leaning on both the White House and my colleagues. We should not adjourn, as is the current plan, for the holidays on December 11th without taking this matter up. It's disrespectful of the troops. It hurts the institution. No president should have the unilateral ability to wage war without a congressional authorization.
What is very frustrating, because you hit the nail on the head, Senator, is the Republican congressmen and senators that I get on my show when I bring up your position and the War Powers Act, which you're a sponsor of. Everyone agrees with me right on the phone, but then nothing happens. One of the best examples, your colleague, Congressman Southeast Virginia, Scott Ridgel, 2nd District, says, look, this isn't the King's Army. You can't be sending in troops or advisors without authorization from Congress. That's the way the Constitution set it up. So when you go to the White House and ask for this, what do they say?
Well, the White House says, what the White House says is, we want Congress to be involved, and we're working out language with Congress, but at the end of the day, it's got to be Congress that casts the vote. Now, the White House is right in saying that. However, I point out that no president has said, I want authorization to go to war, and not sent a draft authorization to Congress for consideration and debate. The fact that the White House has not done that, I think, sends a very weird message about, you know, whether they're trying to end-run Congress, whether they don't trust Congress, whether they don't have a plan that they can put on paper. There's nothing good about the White House not sending an authorization. However, just because the Article 2 branch isn't doing what they ought to do, that doesn't mean the Article 1 branch gets a pass. It's Congress that is supposed to declare war. And what I saw is Democratic and Republican Republican leaders in September say, we don't want to take this up till after the midterm elections. And now I see Democratic and Republican leaders saying, well, maybe we should take this up next year. Every day we allow a unilateral war to go on where we're spending money, dropping bombs, deploying troops, and our troops are even now being killed in connection with this mission. Every day we allow it to happen without a debate does damage to the legislative branch, it's disrespectful of our citizens, and it's especially disrespectful of our troops. How can we ask them to risk their lives when we're not willing to do our job, have the debate, and say this is a mission that is in the national interest? John, you know that I believe strongly it is a mission that's in the national interest. I want to vote for an authorization with appropriate limitations. I think the majority of Congress will do that, but for some reason the White House and the leadership have been slow walking it, and it's not just the Constitution that's getting damaged. It's the troops who are risking their lives while we're not doing the job we're supposed to do.
With Senator of Virginia, U.S. Senator Tim Kaine. Senator, you mentioned something. I want to get back to it for just a second, because you say, why hasn't the White House gone to Congress? One thing is, well, they don't really trust Congress. Obama likes to go around them. He did that with amnesty. I'll get to that in a minute. But the other thing you said is, and why I'm so in favor of what you're saying, is they've got to come to Congress with a plan and say, this is the plan we have. And so it begs the question, do they have a plan?
Well, so to answer it two ways, usually that is the best way to do it. When you draft an authorization and send it to Congress, you kind of describe what the mission is. And then what happens is, what happened when we debated Syria a year ago, the proposal is taken up in the Foreign Relations Committees. There's a debate. Usually there's an edit or a revision or an amendment based upon the questioning of administration witnesses, and then there's a vote. The president usually proposes. The president usually doesn't get exactly the language that the president wants. President Bush brought an authorization to Congress right after 9/11. He got one, but he didn't get the one that he brought to Congress. There was edits and changes to it. That's the way the process works. But if you don't put it down on paper and say, here's the proposed mission, you either lead to the people to think, well, you don't know what the mission is, or you just aren't that interested in Congress. I see a pretty clear mission here, and there are pieces of it that are more straightforward and pieces of it that are more complicated. The mission is to defeat ISIL. The easier piece of it is on the Iraq side of the border, because we're dealing with both an Iraqi army, an Iraqi government now under the prime ministership of al-Abadi that wants us in, that's trying to govern in the right way. We've got Kurdish Peshmerga forces that are tough fighters. So on the Iraq side of this anti-ISIL campaign, we have more to work with. Syria is much more difficult because of the civil war there, because of the groups engaged in the civil war against Bashar al-Assad. There's some groups we might support and some others that make us very, very worried. The scale of humanitarian violence there is significant. The Syrian theater of this war is more complicated, and I think that's the piece of it that everybody has a hard time kind of describing, here's what's going to happen. But the analogy I use is this. When we went into World War II against Germany and Japan, we just didn't invade Germany and Japan on the first day. For Germany, we went into North Africa, then we went into Sicily, then we went into Italy, then we came in through Normandy, and eventually got to Germany. In other words, the campaign against Germany had some phases to it. The campaign against ISIL is going to have phases. The first phase is going to be very intense involvement to try to stabilize the situation in Iraq, to try to stabilize the border between Iraq and Syria, to try to stabilize the border between Syria and other allies like Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. And then it is going to be looking for a mechanism to deal with the ISIL threat in Syria. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the administration just saying it's going to be a phased approach because Syria is a harder nut to crack. They just ought to say that, because that's always the case in military actions like this.
Oh, look, and I think if President Obama does the right thing and goes to Congress, all this will get flushed out. There'll be transparency behind it, and I think you'll get the people behind it, even though I might not be behind it. I'm in the minority, but you'll get the people behind it. I think you hit it on the head. I want to change for a second, get to domestic politics. I want to congratulate you, Senator Kaine, on your courageous vote in your caucus to replace Harry Reid. I think that was the absolute right thing to do. I also want to point out that I predicted that Mark Warner would become the most powerful man in America. And now, even though he voted against Reid, he's in Senate leadership. Now, you look at Mark Warner, he's tried for a long time to work across the aisle. He's not been able to do that, but now he becomes a key player, right?
He does in a couple of ways, John, and just for listeners who don't follow the nitty-gritty as closely as you and I do, in the Senate, it still essentially takes 60 votes to do legislation. So for the last 2 years that I've been here, the dynamic has been, 55 Democrats trying to find on any given piece of legislation, can we find 6 or 7 Republicans who will go along with us so we can legislate? It's now going to flip around and go the other way. It's going to be 53, 54 Republicans looking to find 7 or 8 Democrats to do legislation. And so that means they will be reaching out to Democrats that they know have a good track record of being willing to work across the aisle. No one is better positioned in that role than Senator Warner. I think I've done a good job of building up bridges with the Republican side in my first few years, but Mark's been here 6 years, and he's really built up great relationships. So I think Mark has a wonderful ability to be the bridge builder in this new dynamic. The Republicans will want to do legislation. I'm sure that Mark will say, I can't support you on that. They'll want to do legislation where he'll say, I can support you on that. They'll want to do legislation where he'll be able to say, you know what, I can't support it, but if you can make these changes, I can support it. He's going to be doing that, and I'm going to be doing it. And now that Mark is in leadership, it really gives him the ability to help us craft what the role of a constructive Democratic minority should be. The wrong thing for us to do is just to say, well, we're going to obstruct everything. But frankly, that's what the minority has done the last 2 years. That's not the best thing for the country. We ought to be finding paths forward on things we can work on together. We ought to be drawing clear contrasts in areas where we can't so that the American public can see the different philosophies. But the goal is ultimately to try to get the most done, and Mark's in a great position in leadership to make that happen. I'm really happy that he's there.
So am I, without a doubt. Final question. I got one more minute. 2 weeks ago, President Obama went around Congress, like he's doing with the war, on his executive action on amnesty, 5 million illegals. Senator, you're a lawyer. Was what President Obama did 2 weeks ago, in your judgment, did it have legal authority?
John, I think he has clear legal authority for it, and, I don't hesitate to call him out when I don't think he does, like on this war powers thing. But with respect to the immigration executive order, Congress gave to the president decades ago explicit statutory authority to defer enforcement actions in immigration matters. It was an explicit power given to the president by Congress to defer enforcement activities and even to grant certain rights to folks once their immigration enforcement was deferred. Every president since Eisenhower has used that explicit grant that Congress gave the president to defer immigration activities. What the president is doing is well within the character of what other presidents have done. More importantly, the president waited for Congress to act after the Senate passed immigration reform in June of 2013. The president has waited and waited and waited for the House to do something, anything. How about a committee vote on something? The House has been unwilling to act. I think actually the president's action is now going to finally provoke Congress into doing what it should have done long ago and doing immigration reform. The House bill, I'm sure if they do one, it's going to be different than the Senate bill. Then we'll have to get in the conference room and find a compromise, which is what we ought to do. If the president hadn't acted, the House never would have acted, and I hope they will now act.
Okay, we're out of time, Senator. On that, we can agree to disagree, but here's what I can do. I want to wish you, your wife, Ann, and your family a very Merry Christmas. Thanks for being with us, and keep fighting to get the president to come to Congress because we have an illegal war.
John, thanks so much, and you have a great holiday. Thanks for all the service you provide every day.